You've probably heard of Napoleon Hill, right? The guy who wrote the legendary book Think and Grow Rich, basically the blueprint for getting wealthy. But we're not just talking about that book today. We're going to dive into who he became after all that success and how he completely rewrote the rules on what it actually means to be rich. So get this, decades after his first book became a massive hit, at 84 years old, Hill publishes this book. Now, he's obviously seen a lot, he's much wiser, and he wanted to share what he called the supreme secret, a totally different kind of wealth that has almost nothing to do with money and everything to do with, well, peace of mind. You know, back in the day, Hill was the poster child for wealth. For him, success meant pure, over-the-top opulence. He bought this huge estate up in New York, had a staff of servants, and yeah, he actually believed that driving anything less than a Rolls-Royce was just not an option. He had all the classic symbols of being rich. And then, boom, it all came crashing down. The stock market crash of 1929 completely wiped him out. He lost the cars, the estate, the money, everything. Losing it all like that, I mean, it forces you to ask a pretty heavy question. If all the money's gone, what is wealth really about? And that crisis, that's what led him to his first and maybe most important principle: mastering your own mind. He realized that the one and only thing you truly have 100% control over is what goes on inside your own head. And that, he said, is the real foundation of all power. I mean, think about Thomas Edison. His teacher literally kicked him out of school, saying his mind was addled, basically scrambled, and that he was a lost cause, totally incapable of learning. But Edison, he just chose to ignore that judgment and take charge of his own so-called addled mind. And yeah, we all know how that story ended. And it's not just him. There's this incredible story about Madame Schumann-Heink. She went to a so-called expert, a music teacher, who told her she had zero talent for singing and should just go back to her sewing machine. But she decided, nope, you don't get to tell me who I am. She kept possession of her own mind, and she ended up becoming one of the greatest opera singers of all time. And this hits close to home for Hill himself. As a kid, after his mom passed away, he was a handful. It got so bad that his own dad introduced him to his new stepmother by saying, "This is the meanest boy in Wise County. He'll probably be throwing rocks at you by morning." Can you even imagine being written off like that? But here's where everything changes. Instead of being scared, his stepmother looked him right in the eye and said, "This." That was it. That was the first time anyone had ever seen potential in him, had ever said something positive. And that one moment proved that what other people think, it doesn't have to be your reality. It helped him find his own power. Okay, so mastering your mind sounds great, right? But it's not exactly a walk in the park. There's this huge obstacle that gets in everyone's way. Hill called it the enemy within, a self-made devil he called fear. He believed it was the number one thing holding us back from real wealth. So Hill broke it down. He said there are basically 7 core fears that are the root cause of almost all our unhappiness and failure. You've got the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, that's a big one, the fear of ill health, loss of love, loss of liberty, old age, and of course the fear of death. But here's the kicker, the really crucial part. Every single one of them is self-made. They're prisons we build for ourselves in our own minds. And Hill's way of looking at this is, wow, it's pretty profound. He said that when you're constantly worrying about something, you're pouring all your mental and emotional energy into that negative outcome. It's like you're actively praying for the very thing you're terrified of to actually happen. You're basically asking destructive forces for help instead of constructive ones. Okay, so let's say you get a handle on your mind. You start to conquer those fears. What's next? How do you actually build that rich life? This is where Hill introduces another game-changing idea, the law of compensation. The core idea is so simple, but it's revolutionary. Giving is the absolute surest way to get what you want. And look, Hill lived this stuff. A friend of his had a cafeteria that was totally failing, about to shut its doors for good. So Hill, without asking for a dime, just offers to help. He starts giving free lectures on his success philosophy right there in the dining room. Pretty soon, the lectures were drawing in huge crowds, and it completely saved the business. But here's where it gets crazy. An executive from a big company happened to be there one night, was blown away, and that encounter led to the biggest opportunities of Hill's entire career. That one act of giving, with zero expectation of return, came back to him 1,000 times over. So you have to ask, right? After all this, after making a fortune, losing it all,
studying the most successful people on the planet, and living to be 84 years old, what was the final verdict for Napoleon Hill? What is true wealth?
Well, his final answer was crystal clear. He said that peace of mind, that's the real prize. He called it the wealth without which you cannot really be wealthy. You can have all the money, all the stuff in the world, but without that inner richness, it's all just empty. And when he says peace of mind, he doesn't just mean sitting on a mountain and meditating, you know? For him, it was an active, dynamic thing. It meant being free from all those negative forces we talked about, the fears, the worries, that feeling of inferiority. It's the deep satisfaction you get from real accomplishment. And here's how it all ties together. It's about making a habit of giving to others before you even start thinking about what you're going to get back. So, really, that leaves all of us with a pretty big question to chew on. When you think about his whole journey, from obsessing over a Rolls Royce to realizing that peace of mind was everything, it makes you wonder, what does it really mean for you to grow rich?